This is KRWG, TV, radio, online, news that matters. Next on Newsmakers, protests over the Trump administration's immigration policies lead to a traffic shutdown in Las Cruces. We'll hear from the protesters. Plus, a national bus tour designed to save the Affordable Care Act rolls into New Mexico. And later, part 2 of our conversation with the president of the Islamic Center of Las Cruces. Thanks for joining us on Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. Activists resisting the policies of President Donald Trump let their voices be heard loud and clear this past week in Las Cruces. The National Save My Care bus tour came to town. The bus tour is fighting to save the Affordable Care Act. More on that coming up. But first, the debate over immigration. The Trump administration announced plans to increase deportations. The policy will, quote, no longer exempt classes or categories of removable aliens from potential enforcement, end quote. That plan was released after immigration raids in southern New Mexico and across the country, raids that sparked a major protest in Las Cruces. In depth, here's Simon Thompson.
Here, no hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
Almost 50 people brandishing signs, beating drums and shouting protest songs shut down Main Street Las Cruces traffic for almost half an hour.
What side are you on, my brother?
That's Johanna Bencomo on the bullhorn. She's an organizer with Cafe, the group that coordinated the rally in protest of sweeping ICE raids locally.
Civil disobedience is just another tool in community organizing. When our demands are not heard or met, we will escalate. Today there was no arrest. We did not plan for any arrests, but we wanted to show our community that they don't stand alone and that we will do anything it takes to bring peace to this community.
Bencomo says though deportations were at record highs under the Obama administration, ICE enforcement prioritized deporting criminals over families. She says if these ICE priorities cease under the Trump administration, more immigrants will be living in fear.
It made me more scared.
Brandon Vasquez was brought to the US illegally as a child from Mexico, which has made him eligible for temporary status and relief from deportation through Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. The order was enacted during the Obama administration, but only days before I spoke to Vasquez, a DACA recipient was detained by ICE in Seattle.
I feel like I'm still illegal, like I don't have documents. I feel like I'm still a target to be deported even if I have my DACA permit.
Is it scary or is it like?
Yeah, it's scary. I feel like any type of reason would be enough to deport me. So I feel like I'm just walking on glass.
Bencomo says shutting down peak hour traffic is just a taste of the civil disobedience that could be needed to push elected officials to protect Las Cruces communities from expanded ICE enforcement.
Reform, not raids.
In the Trump era, our communities will have to do drastic measures for change. We know that all resistance to his oppressive policies against our people, that resistance will be localized. We will have to mobilize and organize here locally to try to stop those kinds of things from happening.
Local organising and rallies are also working to oppose the repeal of the Affordable Care Act.
My concern is losing the health care that I have.
Las Cruces Barbara Alvarez suffers from chronic asthma. She has to take a number of different medications, treatments, and sometimes requires medical attention.
About 6 weeks ago, I had a sinus infection and other conditions related to my allergies. I ended up in urgent care and needed to have several medications.
As a professional writer working freelance, Alvarez has only been able to get medical care since the Affordable Care Act came into effect.
If I did not have insurance coverage, I would not have been able to receive the medical care that I needed.
Alvarez is just one of more than 260,000 New Mexicans that, according to the Urban Institute, could lose their health care if the Affordable Care Act is repealed by Congress. A Save My Care bus made a stop in Las Cruces on a national tour to rally up support against repealing the Affordable Care Act.
We're going into cities where you will see a really devastating impact.
That's Anthony Hayes, the bus trip's director.
The goal of the bus tour is to go into towns across the country and raise up local voices so that when members of Congress come home to their districts, they see in their local newspapers, on their local news station, constituents who voted for them describing how devastating it would be if they repealed the ACA. We really want to raise these voices up above the national rhetoric.
I asked Barbara Alvarez what she would do if the Affordable Care Act was repealed without a replacement.
Pray that I don't die.
According to the Urban Institute, Alvarez would just be one of almost 20 million Americans that could become uninsured if the Affordable Care Act is repealed. For KRWG, I'm Simon Thompson.
And Simon Thompson joins us now in studio. Simon, we'll start with healthcare. This is really a difficult situation for Republicans who have promised to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, because if you look at the results, this law has actually cut the population who are uninsured almost in half.
Almost in half. So if you look at the data, in 2010, it was about, uninsured rate was about 16%. And then if you look at 2016, just last year, it went down to 8.6%. So massive impact.
A huge impact, and you had the personal impact of that, talking to folks at that bus tour that's gone all around the country. I know a recent study by the Commonwealth Fund also looked at some other impacts in terms of the ACA, the effect repealing it could have on individual states, including New Mexico.
So there's also the economic impact, which isn't as urgent or as scary as somebody losing their coverage, but for New Mexico, that's 19,000 job losses potentially, and also $10 billion loss in gross state products. So for New Mexico, a state that's already low on finances, that's massive.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that before the ACA, we were dealing with a lot of uncompensated care. So a lot of healthcare facilities could not afford to have the kind of staffing that they do now under the ACA, where there are more folks who are insured, so they're getting reimbursement.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of people who are going to be without care, and they had it previously, so that's why you're seeing a lot of people from both sides of the aisle, like at the rally I was at, who have a lot of concerns about the potential repeal of ACA without a replacement.
Yes, very interesting stuff. We'll continue to watch it. I want to move to immigration. This was an explosive beginning to the show, and we should say you were out there in the thick of this. You shot the video in addition to covering that story. What was that like?
It was a wild protest. It was started off as kind of a rally. There was a lot of emotions were running pretty high, and then it kind of evolved into this high energy protest. The protest was so wild that they didn't even have their chants kind of synchronized. There was different groups in the protest yelling different things, protesting for different reasons. It sounded like, and then it kind of, traffic backed up, and I went to go back to the office to file the report, and then there was another traffic jam because the protest had moved and even more people had arrived. It was
really
high
something.
Energy.
And this kind of energy and interest over this issue is fueled by, as we see behind us here, tweets by Donald Trump on this kind of issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's Donald Trump's basically reinforcing his concerns, or he's re-articulating why this is happening. No, this is a campaign promise. So a lot of people have this concern about these more sweeping and broader immigration raids, but this is something that he promised. It shouldn't be really a surprise for a lot of people.
Yeah. Now, looking at facts instead of looking at tweets, deportations reached 40-year highs under the Obama administration. So this kind of notion that no one was being deported was not true. They were 40-year highs. Give us a sense of why, though, some people fear that the deportations will increase even more under the Trump administration.
So the bigger concern is about that they're more indiscriminate. Instead of being focused on people with criminal records or felons, or as Obama would say, felons, not families. Now they're just sweeping, whole neighborhoods. They'll go to an area where they know a lot of people who don't have legal documentation live, and just knock on door after door and collect whoever's there. So it's instilled a lot of fear in people in the community and their supporters.
Supporters of deportation, as well as the call to build a wall along the border, contend there's been a wave of illegal immigration, but the numbers actually show a decline.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you look at the rhetoric, but the data says something completely different. In 2015, it was found that there was actually more Mexicans leaving the US than coming in. And so that this massive modern wave of immigration that we've seen in the last couple of 30, 40 years has kind of curbed, and there's actually more Mexicans, increasing number of Mexicans going to other first world economies like Canada, Australia, Spain and the UK.
Okay, a lot of economists though are extremely concerned about an immigration crackdown for another reason, saying that immigrants are crucial to our economy. You have some numbers on that too.
Yeah, well, certainly there's a lot of division on the rhetoric, but there seems to be a lot more agreement amongst economists and people in workforce development about the impact of this. 40% of workforce expansion between 2004 and 2014 was related to immigrants. So, that's huge. That's a huge bite potentially out of our workforce, and also a workforce that, economists are hoping to expand.
And a lot of Fortune 500 companies too, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of people that are creating these jobs are the children of immigrants or immigrants themselves. The rate is also about 40%, so huge. These are people that are creating jobs in the US and putting it at the forefront at a lot of industries.
All right, you took a closer look at the economic implications of the Trump administration, right?
I spoke to some economists who assessed the impact and the uncertainty that we're going to see.
All right, let's take a look.
According to Wells Fargo data, consumer and small business confidence has skyrocketed. Wells Fargo economist Eugenio Alemán says the confidence comes with expectations of lower taxes and fewer regulations under the Trump administration.
The elections has produced a very, very impressive change in expectations about the future, which could be positive if it is translated in more consumption, more investment, and so forth.
But NMSU economist Dr. Jim Peach says the jubilation is not likely to translate as strongly in New Mexico.
That's a positive thing, but to actually go out and buy stuff, you have to have income, you have to have employment. And we're not gaining a lot in those areas.
New Mexico is still struggling to recover from the recession. Employment growth lags surrounding states, and declining oil revenues has left a budget shortfall. Peach says while expectations about lower taxes may have pushed market confidence nationally, state corporate and income tax cuts and exemptions implemented over the past 2 decades left New Mexico with a budget crisis.
Dozens and dozens of exemptions from the gross receipts tax and from the personal income tax. We could get rid of some of those. We can fix this anytime we want to.
Peach says a repeal of New Mexico corporate and income tax cuts and a 10-cent increase in the state gasoline tax would solve most budget issues, but it's unlikely to happen legislatively.
There's an anti-tax bias here.
What would New Mexico look like without all these tax cuts and carve-outs?
We would be in very, very good shape.
Peach says New Mexico should be more responsible than relying so heavily on oil revenues.
If you look back over the last 30 or 40 years, the price of oil has decreased in 4 or 5 times in a major way. We've known that this problem exists.
Still, oil commodity prices and revenues are up from last year, and state poverty rates went down slightly. Peach says Santa Teresa, one of the state's few economic bright spots, could face challenges with the Trump administration, specifically the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement and possible tariffs on products coming across the border.
None of those things are good for Santa Teresa.
You can get engaged in what is called tit for tat. You do something to me, I do something to you, and nobody wins.
Alemán says anything that creates uncertainty will be problematic for international trade all over the country.
We are still very in the early stages of the new administration, and it's very, very difficult to know what those policies are going to be or what will be the consequences of these policies. There's very little information on what is coming down the pipeline.
Alaman says despite the Trump administration's rhetoric, US-Mexico trade relations are extremely beneficial to the US economy and consumers. According to the US Department of Commerce, New Mexico's exports to Mexico almost doubled over the course of just 2 years. The lion's share of those exports originating from Doña Ana County. For KRWG, I'm Simon Thompson.
Time now for the weekly look at the issues that shape our community. In Focus.
Hello, I'm Anthony Moreno. Thank you for joining us for In Focus. We continue our conversation today with President of the Islamic Center of Las Cruces. Please welcome back Mr. Radwan Jalad. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony. Happy to be here.
As we were talking last time, we're speaking about the community outreach that the Islamic Center of Las Cruces was participating in with other religious groups in the community of Las Cruces. I was wondering if you could start off by sharing with us a little bit about how that progress has gone and what are some of the questions that people of other faith have about the Muslim faith?
So the outreach group is being started being active about a year and a half ago. We realized that it's very important for the community, what we start calling it Islam 101. So we worked with a couple community member and we established a couple presentation. And from these presentation, it grew. And basically a lot of curiosity is people see the news. We're being a lot on the news lately. Unfortunately, it's negative. It's always, it became the word Islam is associated with the word terrorism, which is totally false. So every community, including Las Cruces, with our outreach, we're working with churches. We got invited to churches. We did a series of education from the Sharia law to the woman right in Islam to what is Islam? And everybody has different questions. So we have the community in Las Cruces, it seemed like is very open to learning, very open to understand what is Islam is about, and is not focused on one area or another. So one of the things we're trying to do is there is 1.6 billion people of Muslim in the world, and we don't want to be hostage for the bad apples we have, because we do have them. But the fact in the United States, as a U.S. citizens, we feel we have a responsibility to be involved in our community, be supportive to other community actions, and work with the churches, work with other synagogue and other organization, being very, very helpful and very, very concerned about our well-being, and they're really stepping up. Like I said, I told you in the last one, I mean, Las Cruces being one of the most generous places for Muslim. I mean, where they recognize us as neighbor and friends, and we have the utmost respect among each other, and they're really being helpful. And the outreach group is really a result of the community asking the question, the community caring about the Muslim population in Las Cruces, about our safety and about our well-being in the community.
Are there concerns within your community about how Muslims are portrayed in the media?
Of course. I mean, unfortunately, there is negative news, and that negative news is not fake. Yeah, there is bad apples. But we would like to have we would like the media to be more sensitive to 1.6 million people, be sensitive to the 3.3 million people you mentioned.
What are some of the things you think that the media could do to really kind of pay attention to that and put things in perspective?
That's a very tough question. Just to answer it in a word is, yes, we do have negative news. They're unfortunate. What happened in California, what happened in Orlando was very, very bad. And it's not what Islam represent. But with the heat of that reporting on the incident on that day, Muslim always kind of like overrun, because there is no time to say, well, you know, most of the Muslims don't really support that. But at some point there has to be a follow-up. Because none of the Muslims agree with what happened with Orlando or California or 9/11 or any of these areas. So we're just, you know, we're U.S. citizen, we're law-abiding citizen. I mean, the student who comes here to study, that's their main focus, not to cause trouble. Mm-hmm. They're here to study. And the media need to do a job, and we cannot tell them how to do their job. We just need a little bit positive attitude at some point, at a different time maybe, because when bad thing happen, everybody's eyes is clouded, and you know, you're focusing on the negative things, and it's like you cannot think positive. And we would like the media to be like this meeting today is a positive, and just kind of work with us. We're not that evil people. We're understand what our religion is about. And you know, that Muslim in the U.S. should not be hostage for the act of a couple radicals that they do exist somewhere else, and they're causing trouble. And we have no control over them, and we don't have control over anything that happened.
I'd like to talk with you a little bit about, at the end of last year, the Southern Poverty Law Center released a report on what they called hate incidents that occurred in the 10 days following the election of President Trump. 6% of 867 incidents were reported to be anti-Muslim incidents. Mm-hmm. What are the concerns within the Muslim community that you are involved with about these incidents, and have you had a discussion about them?
We have. A lot of our congressional gave us a call and made sure that, you know, they're aware of the problems. Racial issues, ethnic, you know, religious, race problem is always going to be there. Like I said, we live in a really nice state. And even though it's a concern for us, we do believe that the law enforcement is going to do their job. Our job is to document and be mindful on how do we react. So it's shameful that a Muslim, an LGBT community member, a Jewish, whatever, you name it. I mean, we can go, the list is so long. Gonna have something when it goes against them. But what we would like to do, what our concern is not, we know these things gonna happen, and we don't want a Matthew Shepard happen to a Muslim or non-Muslim. We don't want any of these things happening again. So we're gonna be mindful, we're gonna be careful. We wanna work with our law enforcement community, educate them about us. We have to trust that they're gonna do the right thing by everybody who got discriminated against. The fact is, we need to, a lot of things is now, everything is heating up. I believe with everything going on, everything is heating up. And I just want to make sure that we're not escalating something that doesn't need to be escalated. If a one person bystander, you know, get attacked verbally, physically, just do the right thing. Report it. You do not need to continue arguing or discussing or trying to educate him on the spot. Just try to walk away, go to a peaceful places. In these incidents, for example, in Albuquerque, this is one of the reported incident. Well, the other shopper came to her aid.
So you're talking about there was a woman who
there
was
were
dressed
women,
a certain way.
It was dressed in Islamic traditional dress, and she was verbally attacked by, one of the other shoppers. And but you know what? There's a lot of people who understand, and there's a lot. Even though there's people who has different agenda, different beliefs, we cannot change their belief. But what I can do is I can de-escalate it by other people, community member coming up and saying, protect her. The shop owner came to protect her. So there is a lot of positive things that we should build up on rather than, oh, we're being attacked.
I see.
So yes, the attack was real. It got reported. There's many civil rights organizations that recording these data, from CARE to ACLU. They're doing a wonderful job. And then there's the law enforcement that need to do their job, which they're doing it. But the problem is they cannot do it if we escalate it to the point where it become political rather than an event.
I understand. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and thank you so much for being here and sharing so much with us. And I want to thank you for joining us. And we want to thank you for joining us for In Focus.
Well,
I'm Anthony
thank
Moreno.
you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Before we go, a program note. Anthony Moreno is continuing his series of In Focus segments on democracy in America in this new political era. We return from a break on March 23rd with the new chair of the Doña Ana County Republican Party. And we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about the public policy issues affecting our region and the country? Email your letters and columns to feedback@nmsu.edu. The local viewpoint section at krwg.org includes an amazing diversity of opinions. We hope you will add your voice, and we hope you'll share your thoughts about possible stories and guests for Newsmakers. That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition, 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd love to hear from you. As I said, email us with those story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.